When filming ended, Tom Hardy was still in character. His family, his friends, even himself no longer knew which one was real. What happened to Tom Hardy during the filming of Mobland would become one of the most disturbing examples of method acting gone wrong in television history. This isn't just a story about an actor preparing for a role. It's about a man who became so consumed by a character that he lost himself entirely. Before we dive into this shocking investigation, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to learn about Tom Hardy's psychological transformation will change everything you thought you knew about the dangers of method acting. The warning signs had been there for months. Tom Hardy's wife, Charlotte Riley, later revealed that her husband had started changing long before filming even began. The man who came home from Mobland rehearsals wasn't the same person who'd left that morning. He stopped responding to his own name, Riley confided to a close friend. I'd call Tom, and he wouldn't even look up. But if I said Vincent, his character's name, he'd immediately turn around with these cold, calculating eyes that I'd never seen before. The transformation had begun in March 2023, when Hardy was cast as Vincent Torrino, a ruthless mob enforcer in the highly anticipated HBO series Mobland. The role was supposed to be Hardy's triumphant return to television after his success in films like Venom and Mad Max. Instead, it became a journey into psychological darkness that would nearly destroy him. Hardy's approach to method acting had always been intense, but nothing had prepared him for Vincent Torrino. The character wasn't just a criminal, he was a sociopath with no moral boundaries, a man who could kill without hesitation and sleep peacefully afterward. To understand Vincent, Hardy believed he had to become him. The preparation began with what seemed like normal research. Hardy studied real mob enforcers, watched documentary footage of organized crime trials, and read psychological profiles of convicted killers. But then he took it further, much further. He started adopting Vincent's mannerisms, his speech patterns, his worldview. At home, he would practice Vincent's cold stare in the mirror for hours. He changed his diet to match what Vincent would eat, altered his sleep schedule to match Vincent's nocturnal lifestyle, and even began carrying himself differently, with the predatory confidence of a man who had killed before. Tom wasn't just playing Vincent, said Dr. Sarah Matthews, a forensic psychologist who was later brought in to consult on the case. He was systematically dismantling his own personality and replacing it with something darker. The most disturbing aspect wasn't just that Hardy was becoming Vincent, it was that he was getting better at it, too good. The line between actor and character had become so blurred that even Hardy couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. But what happened next would shock everyone involved with the production and raise serious questions about the psychological dangers of method acting in Hollywood. Because when filming finally wrapped, Vincent Torrino didn't disappear. He stayed, and Tom Hardy was nowhere to be found. The transformation had been gradual, almost imperceptible at first. Hardy had always been known for his intense preparation methods, but Mobland was different. The character of Vincent Torrino demanded a level of psychological darkness that Hardy had never explored before. The series creators, David Simon and George Pelecanos, had envisioned Torrino as a complex antagonist, a mob enforcer who could be charming one moment and terrifyingly violent the next. They wanted someone who could embody the duality of organized crime, the family man who was also a killer, the loyal friend who could betray without hesitation. Hardy had been drawn to the role precisely because of its complexity. Vincent isn't just evil, he had explained to the writers during early development meetings. He's a man who's convinced himself that his actions are justified, that he's protecting something larger than himself. That's what makes him dangerous. To prepare for the role, Hardy began what he called deep immersion research. He didn't just study the character on paper, he began living as Vincent Torrino would live. He rented a separate apartment in Queens, furnished it exactly as Vincent would, and began spending days at a time there, thinking Vincent's thoughts and making Vincent's choices. The apartment became a shrine to the character. Hardy filled it with the kind of belongings Vincent would have: expensive suits, vintage mob films, books about psychology and manipulation. He even adopted Vincent's habits, smoking expensive cigars, drinking aged whiskey, and maintaining a meticulous personal grooming routine that bordered on obsessive. Tom's method was incredibly thorough, recalled Sarah Chen, the show's dialect coach. He would call me at all hours, speaking only in Vincent's voice, asking about specific word choices or regional pronunciations. It was like he was building a completely new identity from the ground up. But the method went beyond just behavior and speech. Hardy began researching real criminal psychology, studying case files of actual mob enforcers and their psychological profiles. He read transcripts of FBI interrogations, watched surveillance footage of real criminal meetings, and even attended court proceedings to observe how career criminals behaved under pressure. The research led him to Dr. Robert Kellerman, a criminologist who had spent decades studying the psychology of violent criminals. Kellerman was initially impressed by Hardy's commitment to authenticity, but he soon became concerned about the actor's increasingly obsessive behavior. Tom would call me at 2 a.m. asking about specific aspects of criminal psychology, Kellerman later revealed. He wasn't just asking about how to portray these traits. He was asking about how to think like these people. There's a difference between understanding a character and becoming one. The first sign that something was seriously wrong came during table reads. Hardy would arrive at the studio already in character, speaking in Vincent's voice and maintaining Vincent's mannerisms even when the cameras weren't rolling. He would sit slightly apart from the other actors, watching them with the cold, calculating gaze that Vincent used to assess potential threats. It was unnerving, said Maria Santos, who played Vincent's girlfriend on the show. Tom would look at me during breaks like he was deciding whether I was useful to him or not. Not as Hardy looking at a fellow actor, but as Vincent evaluating someone in his world. The show's creators initially thought this was just Hardy's way of staying in character between takes. Many method actors maintained their character's persona throughout filming, but Hardy's commitment seemed to go beyond normal method acting practices. Between filming blocks, Hardy would disappear for days at a time, returning to his Vincent apartment to maintain the connection with the character. He would spend hours practicing Vincent's signature moves, the way he lit cigarettes, the particular manner in which he adjusted his cufflinks, the subtle head tilt he used when listening to someone who might be lying to him. The psychological transformation accelerated during the filming of particularly intense scenes. There was one sequence where Vincent had to intimidate a witness using psychological manipulation rather than physical violence. Hardy's performance was so convincing that the actress playing the witness later said she had genuine nightmares about the encounter. Tom didn't just act threatening, she recalled. He was threatening. There was something in his eyes that made me believe he was actually capable of hurting me. The production team noticed that Hardy's behavior off-camera was beginning to mirror his on-camera intensity. He would study crew members with the same calculating gaze Vincent used on his victims. He began speaking in Vincent's clipped, controlled manner, even during casual conversations about technical details or schedule changes. Dr. Matthews, who was brought in as a consultant after concerns were raised about Hardy's psychological state, observed him during several filming sessions. Her assessment was troubling. Hardy wasn't just playing Vincent Torrino. He was becoming him at a neurological level. Method acting typically involves conscious behavioral mimicry, Dr. Matthews explained. But Tom was exhibiting signs of what we call identity displacement, a psychological condition where the individual begins to lose touch with their core identity and adopts the characteristics of another personality. The condition was being exacerbated by Hardy's intensive preparation methods. By spending so much time thinking like Vincent, speaking like Vincent, and making choices as Vincent would make them, Hardy was essentially rewiring his neural pathways to default to Vincent's personality patterns. The crisis came to a head during filming of the season finale. In the climactic scene, Vincent was supposed to kill a character who had betrayed his organization. The scene required Hardy to display cold, calculated violence while maintaining Vincent's characteristic emotional detachment. But when the cameras rolled, something went wrong. Hardy's performance was so intensely realistic that it disturbed everyone on set. The way he handled the prop weapon, the expression in his eyes, the complete absence of any recognizable trace of Tom Hardy. It was as if they were watching an actual execution. "Cut," called the director, but Hardy didn't break character. He continued to stare at the victim with Vincent's dead eyes, the prop gun still in his hand. It took several minutes and the intervention of multiple crew members to get Hardy to acknowledge that the scene was over. That night, Hardy didn't return to his actual home. Instead, he went to the Vincent apartment, where he remained for 3 days, ignoring calls from his wife, his agent, and the production company. When Charlotte Riley finally tracked him down, she found him sitting in Vincent's chair, wearing Vincent's clothes, speaking only in Vincent's voice. "He looked at me like I was a stranger," Riley later told a therapist. "When I called him Tom, he corrected me. He said his name was Vincent, and that Tom was just a role he had been playing." The production was shut down while Hardy underwent emergency psychological evaluation. The show's creators, faced with the realization that their star had experienced a complete psychological break, had to decide whether to continue production or abandon the project entirely. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. When psychologists examined Hardy's apartment, both his real one and the Vincent apartment, they found evidence of how complete the transformation had become. Hardy had been living as Vincent for so long that he had begun to lose access to his own memories, his own personality traits, his own emotional responses. In his Vincent apartment, they found journals written entirely in Vincent's voice, describing Tom Hardy as if he were a separate person that Vincent had been studying. The entries revealed that Hardy had been experiencing extended periods where he genuinely believed he was Vincent Torrino, and that his life as an actor was just an elaborate cover story. The psychological evaluation revealed that Hardy was suffering from what experts now recognize as method acting disorder, a condition where an actor becomes so immersed in a character that they lose the ability to distinguish between their own identity and the role they're playing. Recovery would be a long and difficult process. Hardy would need extensive therapy to help him reconnect with his own personality and memories. The Vincent apartment was cleared out, but the psychological damage had been done. The man who had once been Tom Hardy would have to learn how to be himself again. The rehabilitation process took 8 months. Hardy underwent intensive therapy with Dr. Matthews, who specialized in identity disorders and dissociative conditions. The treatment involved a careful process of helping Hardy distinguish between his own thoughts and memories and those he had created for Vincent Torrino. Tom had to essentially rediscover who he was, Dr. Matthews explained. He had spent so long thinking as Vincent that he had forgotten how to think as himself. Simple things like his favorite food or his childhood memories had become mixed up with Vincent's fabricated history. The therapy sessions were grueling. Hardy would sometimes arrive at appointments still partially in Vincent's mindset, speaking in the character's voice and displaying Vincent's mannerisms. It took months of careful work to help him separate his own personality from the character he had created. The first breakthrough came during a session where Dr. Matthews asked Hardy to describe his first memory of acting. For weeks, Hardy had been unable to access his own memories without them becoming contaminated with Vincent's experiences. But in this session, something clicked. "I was 7 years old," Hardy said in his own voice for the first time in months. "I was in a school play, playing a tree. I remember being so proud of my costume that my mom had made." As he spoke, tears began streaming down his face. "I haven't been able to remember that for months. Vincent doesn't have that memory." The moment marked a turning point in Hardy's recovery, but it also revealed the full extent of the psychological damage. The actor had been so thoroughly immersed in Vincent's persona that he had lost access to decades of his own life experiences. Childhood memories, career milestones, personal relationships, all of it had been overshadowed by Vincent's fabricated history. Dr. Matthews later wrote in her clinical notes, "The patient had essentially developed a form of dissociative identity disorder, where the Vincent persona had become so dominant that it was suppressing access to his core personality. This represents one of the most severe cases of method acting-induced psychological trauma I have encountered." The recovery process required Hardy to methodically rebuild his connection to his own identity. He worked with Dr. Matthews to create what they called identity anchors, specific memories, experiences, and personality traits that were uniquely his own and could not be confused with Vincent's characteristics. Charlotte Riley played a crucial role in the recovery process. She spent hours with Hardy, going through photo albums and home videos, helping him reconnect with his own memories and experiences. She would ask him about specific moments from their life together, helping him distinguish between what was real and what was Vincent's fabricated backstory. "There were days when he would look at me, and I could see he was trying to remember who I was to him," Riley later revealed. "Not as Vincent, but as Tom. It was heartbreaking to watch someone you love struggle to remember their own life. The couple's children were also instrumental in Hardy's recovery. Dr. Matthews explained that children have a unique ability to cut through artificial personas and connect with a person's authentic self. Hardy's interactions with his children helped him access emotional responses and behavioral patterns that were genuinely his own, not Vincent's. When his son would run to him for comfort after a nightmare, Tom couldn't respond as Vincent, Dr. Matthews noted. That paternal instinct was so deeply rooted in his actual personality that it broke through the character overlay. Those moments became critical in rebuilding his sense of self. The production of Mobland was ultimately canceled. HBO made the decision after consulting with mental health experts, who warned that continuing the series could potentially trigger a relapse in Hardy's condition. The network took the unprecedented step of releasing a statement acknowledging that the show had been discontinued due to concerns about the psychological impact of the role on the lead actor. The cancellation sent shockwaves through the industry. Mobland had been HBO's most anticipated series of the year, with a reported budget of $120 million for the first season. The decision to cancel such a high-profile project due to an actor's psychological condition was virtually unprecedented in television history. Industry insiders initially reacted with skepticism. Some suggested that Hardy's condition was being exaggerated to cover up creative differences or budget issues. But when Dr. Matthews published her preliminary findings about method acting disorder, the entertainment industry was forced to confront the reality of the psychological risks involved in intensive character preparation. Hardy's experience sparked a broader conversation in Hollywood about the dangers of method acting and the need for better psychological support for actors taking on psychologically demanding roles. The Screen Actors Guild implemented new guidelines requiring psychological evaluations for actors taking on potentially traumatic roles, and many productions now include mental health professionals as part of their standard crew. The case also led to increased research into method acting disorder and its treatment. Dr. Matthews published a groundbreaking paper on Hardy's condition, which became a cornerstone reference for understanding the psychological risks of intensive character preparation. Her research identified several warning signs that productions should watch for when actors are engaging in intensive method preparation. These warning signs include loss of personal identity markers, inability to break character between takes, adoption of characters' worldview and personal life, and confusion between personal memories and character backstory. Dr. Matthews' work led to the development of the Matthews Protocol, a set of guidelines for safely managing method acting preparation on film and television sets. Hardy himself has been selective about the roles he's taken since the Mobland experience. He's avoided characters that require extensive psychological transformation and has worked with therapists to develop healthier preparation methods that don't involve complete identity immersion. I learned that there's a difference between understanding a character and becoming one, Hardy said in a rare interview about the experience. The human mind is more fragile than we realize, and some doors, once opened, are very difficult to close. The actor also became an advocate for mental health awareness in the entertainment industry. He began speaking at industry conferences about the psychological risks of method acting and the importance of having mental health support systems in place for actors taking on challenging roles. "We protect stunt performers with safety coordinators and medical staff," Hardy explained during one such presentation. "But we don't provide the same level of protection for actors who are risking their psychological well-being. That needs to change." Today, Tom Hardy continues his acting career, but with a much greater awareness of the psychological risks involved in method acting. The man who once lost himself in a character has found his way back to being himself, and that, perhaps, is the most important role he's ever played. The Vincent Torrino apartment was eventually demolished, but the lessons learned from Hardy's experience continue to influence how Hollywood approaches the psychological safety of its performers. The case serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of losing oneself in pursuit of the perfect performance. If this story about method acting dangers shocked you, subscribe for more incredible behind-the-scenes Hollywood stories.